In the small town of Oak Ridge, where autumn leaves painted the streets in warm hues of amber and gold, two souls were about to collide in a way neither of them expected. Alex Mercer was known around town as the quiet artist who spoke more through his paintings than his words. His studio, nestled above the local bookstore, was his sanctuary, a place where emotions flowed freely onto canvas but rarely past his lips. With dark tousled hair that often fell across his eyes and a pensive gaze that seemed to look through people rather than at them, Alex had mastered the art of keeping others at a comfortable distance. Not because he didn't crave connection, but because he feared the vulnerability that came with it. His past relationships had left invisible scars, teaching him that words could wound more deeply than silence. Jamie Chun, on the other hand, was sunshine personified. As the most beloved barista at the Roasted Bean, Jamie's laugh could be heard from the street, drawing people in like a beacon. With an uncanny ability to remember everyone's orders and the personal stories they shared over steaming cups of coffee, Jamie had become a confidant to many in Oak Ridge. But beneath that radiant smile and easy conversation lay a depth that few were privileged to discover. Jamie, too, carried wounds, but had chosen to heal them through connection rather than isolation. These two had orbited each other for months, their friendship growing in small moments. Jamie saving Alex's favorite corner table by the window, Alex leaving small sketches on napkins as tips. There was something unspoken between them, a current of possibility that neither had been brave enough to acknowledge. Until now. The message that lit up Alex's phone that morning was simple yet loaded with potential. Need to see you. Let's meet at our spot at 7. I want to talk about feelings. The last word had made Alex's heart race. Feelings. The very thing he'd become an expert at avoiding. Let me explain why this matters so deeply. In a world where we're constantly connected through screens, yet increasingly disconnected in our hearts, the courage to have real conversations about emotions has become a rare and precious thing. This story isn't just about two people potentially falling in love. It's about the universal human struggle to lower our defenses and let others see our authentic selves. It's about the risk we take when we choose vulnerability over safety, and how that choice can transform not only our relationships, but our very lives. As the hours ticked by that day, Alex found himself unable to focus on his latest commission. His brush hovered indecisively over the canvas, much like his thoughts circled around Jamie's message. What feelings exactly? Were they the same ones that had been growing in Alex's chest for months now? The ones he'd tried to capture in his art, but never in words? Or was this about something else entirely? The uncertainty was excruciating. Alex had known Jamie for almost a year now, ever since he'd stumbled into the Roasted Bean seeking refuge from an unexpected downpour. That day, Jamie had not only provided him with a towel and the best cappuccino he'd ever tasted, but also with conversation that didn't feel forced or draining. There was something about Jamie that made silence comfortable and words come easier. Over time, their friendship had evolved into something Alex couldn't quite define but cherished deeply. They'd shared movie nights and hiking trips, conversations about art and family and dreams. But they'd never talked about feelings, at least not the kind that made your palms sweat and your heart race at the mere thought of the other person. The memory of their last encounter floated to the surface of Alex's mind. They'd been walking back from a local art exhibition, the summer evening warm around them, their shoulders occasionally brushing in a way that sent electricity through Alex's body. Jamie had looked at him with an expression he couldn't decipher, opened his mouth as if to say something important, then seemed to think better of it. Instead, they'd parted with their usual casual goodbye, but something had shifted. Perhaps tonight was about addressing that shift. By the time 6:30 rolled around, Alex had changed his outfit 3 times, settling on a simple blue button-down that Jamie had once said brought out his eyes. He arrived at the Roasted Bean 15 minutes early, claiming their usual corner table and ordering a black coffee he was too nervous to drink. The cafe was quieter than usual, with just a few patrons scattered around, soft indie music playing in the background. Perfect for a conversation about feelings, he thought, with a mixture of dread and anticipation. At precisely 7:03, Jamie was charmingly, consistently 3 minutes late to everything. The bell above the door jingled, and there he was. Jamie's cheeks were flushed from the brisk evening air, his scarf slightly askew, and he was carrying 2 paper bags from the bakery down the street. Their eyes met across the room, and Jamie's smile was like sunrise, gradual, warm, illuminating. Alex felt something inside him unfurl, a tightness he hadn't realized he'd been carrying loosening just a bit. "Hey you," Jamie said, sliding into the seat across from him. "I brought reinforcements. Feelings talks require sugar. It's basically a law." He opened the bags to reveal 2 slices of the chocolate raspberry cake they'd discovered together months ago during a rainstorm that had trapped them in the bakery for hours. Alex couldn't help but smile. This was so typically Jamie, thoughtful, slightly dramatic, making everything feel like an adventure rather than a source of anxiety. "You know me too well," he replied, accepting the offering. "So, feelings, huh? That's a pretty broad topic. Any particular feelings we're discussing tonight?" Jamie took a deliberate bite of cake, eyes never leaving Alex's face. "I was thinking we could start with the ones that have been doing a complicated dance between us for, oh, about the last 6 months? Unless I've been reading things completely wrong, which is always possible. I've been known to see what I want to see sometimes." The directness of Jamie's approach was both terrifying and relieving. There would be no dancing around the subject, no pretending they didn't both feel the current that ran between them whenever they were together. Alex took a deep breath, buying time by taking a sip of his now lukewarm coffee. "You haven't been reading things wrong," he finally admitted, his voice softer than he intended. I'm not great at this part. The talking about it part." Jamie's expression softened, understanding replacing the slight nervousness that had been there moments before. "I know. That's why I figured I should be the one to bring it up. You're more of a show-don't-tell kind of person. I've noticed how you express yourself through your art, through small gestures. The way you always remember how I take my tea when I'm sick. The sketch you did of my hands that you thought I didn't see you working on. You speak in your own language, Alex. I've just been trying to become fluent in it." Something warm bloomed in Alex's chest at these words. The fact that Jamie had been paying such close attention, interpreting his nonverbal cues, understanding his methods of communication. It was more intimate than any conversation they could have had. "I've been scared," Alex confessed, surprising himself with his honesty. "Not of you, but of what I feel when I'm with you. It's intense, and I don't have the best track record with relationships. I tend to retreat when things get too real." Jamie nodded, reaching across the table to touch Alex's hand briefly. "I know about Marcus," he said gently, referring to Alex's ex who had left abruptly after 3 years together, claiming Alex was emotionally unavailable. "And I'm not saying I'm nothing like him, because I don't know that. But I do know that I value your particular way of communicating. Not everyone speaks the same emotional language, and that's okay. This understanding, this acceptance of his nature rather than a demand for him to change it, loosened something further in Alex's chest. He found himself wanting to explain more, to help Jamie understand the landscape of his heart. "It's not that I don't have feelings," he said, his eyes fixed on the table between them. "Sometimes I think I have too many, and they get all tangled up inside me. That's why I paint. It helps me sort through them. But putting them into words feels like trying to capture the ocean in a teacup. Inadequate. Impossible." Jamie's smile was gentle, patient. "Then don't try to capture the whole ocean at once. Just tell me one drop. One feeling. Right now." Alex looked up then, meeting Jamie's gaze directly. The cafe around them seemed to fade away, the soft music and murmured conversations becoming distant background noise. In Jamie's eyes, he saw nothing but warmth and genuine interest. No judgment, no impatience, no demand for him to be different than he was. "When I'm with you," Alex began slowly, "I feel like I can breathe. Like there's no performance required. No mask I need to wear. It's peaceful and terrifying, because I've never felt that way with anyone before." Jamie's expression softened even further, a vulnerability appearing that matched Alex's own. "Can I tell you something about my feelings now?" When Alex nodded, Jamie continued, "I've always been the person who fills silences, who makes everyone comfortable, who keeps the conversation flowing. It's exhausting sometimes, always being on. But with you, I don't feel that pressure. Your silences aren't empty spaces I need to fill. They're restful places where I can just be. Do you know how rare that is?" Alex hadn't known. He'd always assumed his quiet nature was something people tolerated rather than appreciated. To hear that it provided something valuable to Jamie, especially Jamie, who seemed so naturally social and expressive, was revelatory. "I think that's why we work so well as friends," Jamie continued, a slight emphasis on the last word that suggested a question beneath it. We give each other what we need without having to ask. But lately, I've been wondering if we could be more than that. If what we have could grow into something deeper. And there it was, the question that had been hovering between them for months, finally given voice. Alex felt his heart racing, adrenaline coursing through him as if he were standing on the edge of a cliff, contemplating the exhilarating, terrifying leap into unknown waters below. I've been wondering the same thing, he admitted, his voice barely above a whisper. But I'm afraid I'll disappoint you. That you'll eventually get tired of interpreting my silence, of waiting for me to express things the way other people do. Jamie leaned forward, eyes intense. Alex, I'm not asking you to change who you are. I'm just asking if you want to explore this connection between us. We can go as slowly as you need. There's no rush, no script we have to follow. As Alex searched for a response, Jamie continued, vulnerability evident in every word. Maybe I should tell you why this matters so much to me. Why I finally decided to bring this up now. Jamie took a deep breath, fingers fidgeting with the edge of his napkin. My last relationship was with someone who loved how outgoing and expressive I am. At first, they were drawn to my energy, my sociability. But over time, they started seeing only that surface level. They never tried to understand the quieter parts of me, the moments when I needed rest and reflection. They treated those moments like failures, like I was letting them down by not always being on. Eventually, I started to believe them, that my worth was tied to how entertaining and expressive I could be. Alex felt a surge of protectiveness hearing this. The idea that someone had made Jamie feel inadequate for having natural human needs for quiet and introspection was infuriating. That's why being with you has been so healing, Jamie continued softly. You see all of me, not just the barista who remembers everyone's coffee order and makes them laugh, but also the person who sometimes needs to sit in silence and watch the sunset without saying a word. You've never made me feel like I'm only valuable when I'm performing. The revelation that they had each been healing something in the other without even realizing it struck Alex deeply. Perhaps this was what real connection was about. Not just attraction or common interests, but a mutual recognition and honoring of each other's authentic selves. I think, Alex said carefully, that we've been speaking the same language all along, just in different dialects. Jamie's smile was radiant. That's a beautiful way to put it. So, are you willing to learn more of my dialect if I promise to keep studying yours? The question hung between them, full of possibility. Alex found himself nodding before he could overthink it. Yes, he said simply. I'd like that very much. Something shifted in the atmosphere between them, a new awareness that made the air feel charged with potential. Jamie's hand moved across the table again, this time coming to rest on top of Alex's, their fingers slowly intertwining. The physical connection sent warmth spreading up Alex's arm and throughout his body. Can I ask you something else? Jamie said, his voice taking on a playful quality that made Alex's stomach flutter. I'm curious about something you said earlier, about how you feel when you're with me. You mentioned it was peaceful and terrifying. Can you tell me more about the terrifying part? Alex felt heat rise to his cheeks, but Jamie's open expression encouraged him to continue. Terrifying because when you care deeply about someone, you give them the power to hurt you. And I've spent a long time building walls to prevent that very thing. Jamie nodded, understanding in his eyes. I know about walls. I build mine differently, with jokes and stories and constant movement. But they serve the same purpose. They keep people at a safe distance. So what are we doing here? Alex asked softly. Dismantling our walls. Maybe, Jamie replied. Or maybe just creating a door between them. A way to visit each other's worlds without having to tear everything down at once. The metaphor resonated with Alex, easing some of his anxiety. A door felt manageable. A door could be opened gradually, closed when needed, but always with the possibility of reopening. As they continued talking, their conversation flowed more easily, moving between light-hearted reminiscences of their friendship and deeper explorations of what they might become to each other. Alex found himself speaking more freely than he had with anyone in years, encouraged by Jamie's attentive listening and thoughtful responses. They were in the middle of laughing about their disastrous attempt at making homemade pasta together the previous month when the bell above the cafe door jingled loudly. Alex glanced up automatically, then felt his body go rigid. Marcus, his ex-boyfriend, was walking into the roasted bean, accompanied by a man Alex didn't recognize. Of all the cafes in town, on all the nights, the universe had a cruel sense of timing. Jamie, noticing the sudden tension in Alex's posture, followed his gaze. "Oh," he said quietly, recognition dawning. "That's him, isn't it?" Alex nodded, unable to speak. He hadn't seen Marcus in almost a year, not since their painful breakup where Marcus had listed all the ways Alex had failed as a partner. Too distant, too quiet, too inside his own head. The criticisms that had seemed so true at the time now rang hollow in light of his conversation with Jamie, but the sight of his ex still triggered a visceral response, a tightening in his chest, a desire to retreat. Marcus hadn't noticed them yet, focused on ordering at the counter. Alex had seconds to decide how to handle this unexpected collision of past and potential future. Part of him wanted to duck out the back door, avoiding the confrontation entirely. But another part, perhaps the part that had been strengthened by Jamie's acceptance, wanted to stay right where he was. "We can leave if you want," Jamie offered quietly, squeezing his hand. No questions asked. The generosity of this offer, the lack of pressure or judgment, helped Alex find his voice. "No," he said firmly. "I don't want to run. This is our place. Our conversation. I don't want to let him interrupt that." Jamie's smile was proud, supportive. "Okay, we stay. But if you change your mind at any point, just give me a signal, and we're out of here." The moment of decision was taken from them when Marcus turned from the counter and his eyes landed on their table, or more specifically, on their intertwined hands. His expression shifted from surprise to something more complicated before he said something to his companion and began walking toward them. "Alex," Marcus said, his voice carrying that familiar note of condescension that Alex hadn't recognized during their relationship but now heard clearly. "It's been a while." "Marcus," Alex replied simply, not offering more. Marcus's eyes flicked to Jamie, then back to Alex. "Aren't you going to introduce me to your friend?" The slight pause before the word friend carried an implication that made Alex's jaw tighten. Before he could respond, Jamie extended his free hand, smile polite but eyes cool. "Jamie Chun, I know who you are. Alex has mentioned you." Marcus raised an eyebrow, clearly trying to determine exactly what Alex might have shared. "All good things, I hope," he said with a forced laugh. "Honest things," Jamie replied evenly. The tension was palpable. Alex could feel himself beginning to retreat inward, the old pattern of shutting down in emotional confrontation taking over. Marcus seemed to sense this, a familiar look of disappointment crossing his face, the same expression he'd worn countless times during their relationship when Alex had failed to respond the way he wanted. "Well," Marcus said after an uncomfortable silence, "I should get back to my date. Good to see you're doing well, Alex." As Marcus turned to leave, something shifted in Alex. The contrast between how Marcus had always made him feel, inadequate, broken, wrong, and how Jamie made him feel, accepted, valued, understood, crystallized in that moment. Without planning to, he found himself speaking. "Marcus," he called, his voice stronger than expected. When his ex turned back, surprise evident on his face, Alex continued, "I am doing well. Really well, actually. I hope you are too." The simple statement, delivered without anger or bitterness, felt like closing a door that had been left ajar for too long. Marcus studied him for a moment, perhaps noting the change in his demeanor, then nodded once before returning to his date at the counter. Jamie squeezed his hand again. "That was impressive," he said softly. Alex exhaled slowly, feeling a weight lift from his shoulders. It felt good. Different. Usually I just freeze up in situations like that. "Different how?" Jamie asked, genuine curiosity in his voice. Alex thought for a moment, trying to identify the shift. "I guess. I didn't feel like I needed to defend myself or prove anything. I just stated how I felt, and that was enough." Jamie's smile was warm. "That's exactly how it should be. Your feelings are valid just as they are. They don't need justification or elaboration to be real and important." The simple validation in these words washed over Alex like a warm wave. He realized that in the aftermath of seeing Marcus, he'd expected to feel the familiar urge to withdraw, to protect himself by retreating into silence. Instead, he found himself wanting to move closer to Jamie, to continue their conversation with even more openness. "Thank you," he said simply, knowing Jamie would understand all that those two words contained. As the evening progressed, they gradually recovered the intimate atmosphere that had been momentarily disrupted. Their conversation meandered through childhood memories, professional aspirations, favorite books, and philosophical questions about art and emotion. With each exchange, Alex felt the connection between them deepening, becoming more textured and resilient. It was nearly closing time when Jamie looked at him with an expression that made Alex's heart skip. "There's something I've been wanting to ask you all night," Jamie said, a hint of nervousness in his voice that was endearing on someone usually so confident. "What is it?" Alex asked, curious about what could make Jamie hesitant after all they'd shared. "I was wondering if I could kiss you." "Not here, necessarily," Jamie added quickly, glancing around at the nearly empty cafe. "But maybe when we leave? I completely understand if you're not ready for that step yet." "There's no rush at all." The question sent a flutter of anticipation through Alex's body. He'd imagined kissing Jamie more times than he cared to admit, but the reality of it potentially happening tonight was both thrilling and intimidating. His instinct was to overthink, to analyze all the potential outcomes and implications, but something in Jamie's expectant, hopeful expression made him want to respond from his heart rather than his head. "Yes," he said simply. "I'd like that." The walk from the cafe to the small park nearby was filled with a charged silence, their shoulders brushing occasionally, fingers grazing but not quite holding. The night air was cool against Alex's flushed skin, stars visible above them in the clear autumn sky. They stopped by the fountain at the center of the park, its gentle splashing the only sound besides their breathing. Jamie turned to face him, reaching up slowly to brush a strand of hair from Alex's forehead. The tender gesture made something catch in Alex's throat. "Is this still okay?" Jamie asked softly. In response, Alex closed the distance between them, bringing his hand up to cup Jamie's cheek. Their lips met gently at first, a question rather than a statement. But as Jamie's arms wrapped around his waist, pulling him closer, the kiss deepened into something more certain, more profound. Alex felt as though something long dormant within him was awakening, unfurling like a flower reaching for sunlight. When they finally pulled apart, both slightly breathless, Jamie rested his forehead against Alex's. "That was worth waiting for," he murmured, a smile in his voice. Alex found himself smiling too, a genuine expression of joy that felt unfamiliar on his face but entirely right in this moment. "Definitely," he agreed. They stood there for a long moment, arms around each other, the fountain's mist occasionally catching the moonlight and creating miniature rainbows around them. Alex was struck by how comfortable this intimacy felt. Not overwhelming or anxiety-inducing as he'd feared, but natural. "Right. So what happens now?" he asked eventually, his practical nature reasserting itself. Jamie laughed softly. "Now we keep talking. Keep learning each other's languages. Keep building whatever this is between us, one conversation at a time." He pulled back slightly to look into Alex's eyes. "And maybe more kisses, if you're amenable to that suggestion." "I think that could be arranged," Alex replied, surprising himself with the playful tone. "I'm finding I quite enjoy this particular form of communication." Jamie's laughter was bright in the quiet night. "See? You're more fluent in my dialect than you thought." As they walked hand in hand through the park, making plans for dinner the following evening, Alex reflected on the journey that had brought them to this point. From that first rainy day in the cafe to this moment of new beginning, they had been building something unique and valuable, a connection based not on changing each other, but on understanding and appreciating their differences. In the months that followed, their relationship would face challenges, as all relationships do. There would be moments when Alex's need for solitude clashed with Jamie's desire for connection, times when Jamie's expressiveness overwhelmed Alex's more reserved nature. But they had established a foundation of mutual respect and communication that allowed them to navigate these differences with grace and growing wisdom. They learned to create a rhythm that honored both their needs. Quiet mornings in Alex's studio where Jamie read while Alex painted, lively evenings with Jamie's friends where Alex participated at his own comfort level. They discovered that love wasn't about erasing differences but celebrating them, about creating a shared language that incorporated both of their native tongues. 6 months after that pivotal conversation in the Roasted Bean, Alex completed a series of paintings titled Dialogues, abstract works that captured the essence of their relationship through color and form. At the gallery opening, Jamie stood proudly beside him as visitors admired the emotional depth of the pieces. When someone asked Alex to explain the inspiration behind the works, he found himself speaking with an ease that would have been unimaginable before Jamie. "They're about communication," he said, his hand finding Jamie's beside him. "About how we connect across differences. About finding someone who doesn't just hear your words, but listens to your silences too." Jamie squeezed his hand, eyes shining with understanding and love. In that moment, Alex knew with certainty that their conversation was just beginning. A lifelong dialogue of words and silences, of art and touch, of two different souls learning to speak as one. Total _char_count, 18,654.